The moment froze like shattered glass. A pilot in olive drab stood stunned, clipboard clutched weakly in his hand, his eyes locked not on the belt of shimmering brass rounds feeding into the Apache's cannon, but on the exposed skin of the woman handling them. Her flight suit had shifted, revealing an angular tattoo on her side, black ink sharpened into a geometric star within interlocking patterns. His breath caught in his throat. That design wasn't decorative, it was restricted. It belonged to a classified unit that was never spoken of. Outside closed doors. The woman didn't flinch. She kept feeding the rounds into the machine with practiced efficiency, her eyes briefly cutting back at him, calm, unreadable. Her expression held none of the arrogance that younger soldiers wore so easily, none of the swagger he had expected from anyone bold enough to stand by an attack helicopter with her suit half unzipped. Instead, she was measured, deliberate, like someone who had been here before, on airstrips hotter than this, with the weight of something greater than herself on her shoulders. Those around them didn't notice. Ground crew bustled with checklists. Other pilots stretched before flight prep. The desert sun burned down on steel and sand alike, and life on base pressed forward. But for him, everything had stopped. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Erin Locke, though most didn't know that. On paper, she was listed under an innocuous logistics assignment, shuffled into a corner where questions would never follow. She worked quietly, spoke little, and seemed content in roles where no spotlight touched her. That alone had made her an oddity in a culture obsessed with proving worth in noise and bravado. Yet that tattoo, now exposed, whispered of another life. A life she had not chosen to share. Years earlier, Erin had belonged to an experimental unit buried so deep in the military structure that few outside a circle of shadows knew it existed. She had endured training that stripped soldiers down to their last fragment of willpower, training designed not just for skill, but for unbreakable silence. Missions blurred together in places too far from any map, in valleys that smelled of dust and fear, in cities where every corner could mean death. She had been there the night the mission known only as Firewatch collapsed. Explosions painted the night sky. Comrades fell in the darkness, and the world she thought she controlled crumbled around her. By dawn, she was one of the few survivors, her body scarred, her voice quieter than it had ever been. When she returned differently. She carried loss in her silence, carried names she never spoke aloud, and carried a loyalty that refused to fade even when the military quietly erased her unit from its books. The tattoo remained, hidden under fabric, a vow etched into skin that she would not forget. And yet here she was, years later, loading ammunition like a mechanic, her role far below the authority she once commanded. She did it without complaint, as if blending into the background was its own form of shield. But silence is a powerful weapon, and on this runway, it began to unravel the order of things. The pilot staring at her was Captain Nathan Reeves, young, brash, ambitious. He had spent his career climbing by being louder, faster, more visible than the next man. He knew codes and clearances, and he knew what he had seen inked into her flesh should not exist outside high-clearance briefings. For a moment, the arrogance drained from him, replaced by unease. What unsettled him wasn't only the mark itself, but the way she wore it, without explanation, without fear. He demanded to know where she got it, his voice taut with disbelief. She didn't answer. She simply met his eyes and then turned back to the ammunition, her silence heavier than any words could have been. That silence spread, unsettling the others nearby. The laughter of a mechanic trailed off. The casual banter of the crew quieted. Everyone could feel a shift they couldn't yet name. Nathan pressed harder, his questions edged with challenge, but she stayed still. She knew something he didn't. She had lived something he could never understand. In her silence, she wasn't avoiding conflict. She was holding the line, the way she had once done for those who never came home. Every second deepened the tension. By staying silent, she made the others ask themselves what kind of strength it took to say nothing. In that silence was defiance. In that silence was dignity. The conflict grew in whispers. Word spread across the base that the quiet woman working ground support bore a tattoo she had no right to. Some mocked her behind her back, others dismissed her as a fraud. The weight of suspicion pressed down, but still she said nothing. She moved through her tasks each day with calm precision, her quiet presence more unnerving than any protest could have been. What no one realized was that silence often draws allies in ways words cannot. Among the older officers, men and women who had seen too much to be fooled by swagger, questions began to form. A colonel recognized the design from a mission briefing years ago. A retired chief saw in her walk the rhythm of someone who had lived and bled in the shadows. One by one, they began to see her not as an imposter, but as a survivor of a world that had been erased. It all came to a head weeks later during a major readiness drill. The pilots gathered, the crews prepared, and the exercise unfolded under the eyes of inspectors sent from command. Nathan, still hungry for dominance, pushed for leadership, eager to prove himself in front of the brass. Yet when a sudden fault grounded one of the helicopters, and the simulation spiraled toward chaos, it wasn't Nathan who found the answer. It was Erin. She didn't step forward with speeches or demands. She simply walked to the map, traced a route with her finger, and repositioned the crews with quiet authority. The plan was flawless, calculated, tested in real fire long ago. The simulation turned from near disaster into a resounding success within minutes. The inspectors asked who had devised it. No one answered at first, but silence has a way of pointing toward its keeper. All eyes turned toward her. Nathan's face burned, pride and fear colliding. He realized in that instant what the tattoo truly meant. She wasn't beneath him, she was far beyond him, and in that moment, his arrogance cracked, replaced by respect he could not deny. Later, when the crews dispersed, a few stayed behind. They approached her not with questions, not with demands, but with quiet nods. The kind of nods soldiers give when they recognize one of their own, when they realize that the loudest warrior is not always the strongest. It was then that her silence broke. Just once, not with a story, but with words etched as sharply as her tattoo. She said that some battles were never recorded, some victories never announced, but those who carried them bore the weight for life. Her voice was low, steady, filled with the kind of authority that does not need to rise above a whisper. From that day forward, the mocking stopped. On the airstrip as she passed, the laughter quieted into something else, respect. Not demanded, not forced, but earned through the kind of strength that no title or rank could bestow. Her tattoo remained visible on rare occasions, but no one questioned it again. It became less of a secret and more of a silent testament. A reminder that the strongest warriors often walk unseen, carrying scars and vows that the world may never understand. Somewhere deep in her mind, Erin knew she had fulfilled her promise. Not the promise to speak of what happened, but the promise to carry it without shame, to let it shape her actions in silence. She knew, too, that those who once fell beside her would not be forgotten. And so she continued to load the Apache's ammunition, the desert sun burning against her skin, the tattoo still etched across her side. Around her, men who once doubted now stepped aside to give her room. In their silence, they finally understood hers. Because silence, when chosen, is not weakness. Silence can be its own kind of command, its own kind of power. And in that silence, she had won a battle that no one could ever take from her. Some victories roar in headlines. Others live only in quiet acts, in nods of respect, in tattoos hidden until the right moment. But for those who witness them, they are unforgettable. The strongest stories are not always told out loud. Some are written in silence, etched in ink, and lived in the unshakable dignity of those who carry them. If you are watching this, reflect on the strength you've seen here. Respect the silent battles others carry. Share where you are listening from. Share what this story stirred in you, and never forget that the quietest people around you may be carrying the loudest truths.